A 75-year-old comic icon has rose to the top of Hollywood's controversy list. Recent projects involving Bill Murray have been shelved. Co-stars won't collaborate with him. What he did, however, isn't the true shock. It's what he is currently talking about it. His remarks at a recent screening have the entire industry talking. The 1970 arrest at the airport was a farce. There was nothing to the on-set conflicts. The claims that are popular right now date back several decades. Furthermore, nobody anticipated Murray's retort. It is the topic of constant discussion on the internet. Bill Murray was born in Evanston, Illinois, on September 21, 1950. But his journey really started in Wilmot, Music, in a tiny, noisy home full of 9 kids and the burden of survival. He was fifth in line for Music. Not much more than a typical Irish Catholic youngster with a sense of humor and hand-me-downs. His father, Edward, made between $13 and $800 a year as a lumber trader, just enough to cover the expenses of a Catholic school and a growing family. For $3.50, the Murray lads walked miles to pick up golf bags at Indian Hill Club, then returned each cent to the family pot. Their dinner table had a single rule, despite their chaotic home and noisy lives. The dishes were done by you if you weren't witty. At the age of 46, his father passed away in December 1967 due to music diabetes. Bill was 17 years old. It all changed. The tiny, disorderly world grew heavier. His mother, Lucille, was left to keep everything together while working long hours in a mailroom for medical supplies and trying to protect 9 children from collapsing. Brian, Bill's brother, returned home from college. Second City hired him, and Bill's future would soon be on that stage. Bill wasn't made for the straight and narrow. He enjoyed sports and studied just enough to be active while attending St. Joseph's. His favorite books were about American frontiersmen and outlaws, Kit Carson, Wild Bill Hickok, rebels, risk-takers, and those who broke the law. Within him, that rebellious spark blossomed. He joked with instructors and students at Loyola Academy, played golf, and played in a rock band called the Dutch Masters. He made up lyrics, sang Beatles covers, and used music as a way to cope with sadness. He got a stage from the band. He never really strayed away from his music. He relocated to Denver for college in 1968 with the intention of attending Regis to study pre-med, but this plan was abandoned. Home was missed. His grades fell apart. In the process of hitchhiking back to Illinois, he encountered odd, giving, and absurd people. No textbook could ever fully capture the impact of the ride home. In 1970, on his 20th birthday, he joked about carrying bombs in his backpack while waiting in line at O'Hare Airport. The ticket's salesperson heard him. His baggage contained about 10 pounds of marijuana, valued at $20,000. The Chicago Tribune's main page featured the story. Murray was placed on probation and eventually quit. He turned around instead of spiraling. The door was opened by Brian, who now works for Second City. Bill joined their traveling group in 1973. In a few months, he was performing alongside Betty Thomas and John Candy. He performed as deadpan and wild, an eccentric lounge singer who made fun of bar acts with broken music charm. After breaking a heckler's arm during a performance, he drove him to the hospital and bought him a beer. It became a legend. He was in danger. He lacked refinement. He was memorable. Bill relocated to New York a year later, in 1974. He appeared on the National Lampoon Radio Hour with Christopher Guest, John Belushi, and Gilda Radner. Chaos reigned. It was ideal. He portrayed a broken elevator operator, a phony Santa Claus in Kung Fu Christmas, and any other ridiculous character that sprang to him. During a sketch one evening, he unintentionally burned a prop. The stage was on the verge of burning. The crowd erupted. That was his movement. Always on the verge of collapse, but close to catastrophe. In 1975, ABC's Saturday Night Live gave him his first significant opportunity on television. The brief show hosted by Howard Cosell, not the Lorne Michaels version. At last, he performed his Nick the Lounge Singer act there, crunching through hits like Music, Feelings. The crowd chuckled. The bit stuck, although it was difficult to identify it. He didn't do well when he eventually tried out for Saturday Night Live on NBC. The producers were not persuaded. They offered him a writing position rather than rejecting him. He worked on his sketches behind the scenes while silently awaiting a respite. The departure of Chevy Chase was that break. Murray intervened. It was a disastrous first live music performance. The lounge singer returned stronger than before, despite his pleas for laughter from the audience. People warmed up gradually. He was an integral part of the team by the third season. Instead than imitating others, he made SNL his stage by remaining unique, witty, and surprising. No one had seen a stovepipe hat outside a museum in more than a century before he entered. Bill Murray's portrayal of Abraham Lincoln was not delivering a speech on January 15, 1977. He had an interview for a position. He responded to contemporary HR inquiries in stiff, antiquated English with utter earnestness, scratching his sideburns and refusing to remove his hat, music, as if it were still 1863. The sketch was ridiculous. That was the reason it worked. Because of the awkwardness, which seemed like it would collapse at any moment, the audience chuckled. Murray had not even spent that much time on Saturday Night Live. However, he was already hosting again by April. And that same Lincoln reappeared. Who wrote the sketch was irrelevant. It was unforgettable because of Murray's deadpan delivery and strange physical timing. For years, SNL kept bringing it up. Because it was incorrect in every manner, people remembered it. On October 14, 1978, a year later, Bill Murray stood in front of 20 million people, posing as a family. That night, he was a photographer who demanded mime work like invisible spaghetti eating while yelling commands and moving limbs. Most of it wasn't written, therefore it didn't feel that way. The bones were written by Al Franken, but Murray colored outside of each line. Blondie performed music, Steve Martin presented, and Murray stole the show with absurd poses and erratic outbursts. People recalled it instead of just laughing. The segment was rerun, mentioned, dissected in retrospectives, and even reappeared in subsequent seasons. It was strange, violent, boisterous, and it transformed Murray from a cast member into something more. As early as 1980, Bill Murray was giving tours of a prehistoric structure constructed completely of cinnamon buns. The sketch was a fever dream, and the music and sketch were scheduled to air on April 5. He frequently returned to this imaginary stone bun while ranting crazily about the wonders of ancient pastries. The audience was unable to discern where the joke ended and history began. That was the magic. Already the show was changing. There would be cast changes. However, Murray appeared invincible. It wasn't only that his impromptu, meandering manner worked. For years, it influenced the way he would portray characters. Similar to The Life Aquatic, 13.5 million people watched the program that night. Even music had a sense of seriousness. But things were collapsing behind the scenes. Murray detested the fact that John Domanian became the producer in 1980. The show, in his opinion, had lost its edge. He made that public. In a half-joking caustic surprise visit on May 24, the night Buck Henry hosted, Murray hinted that the show was coming to an end. After 3 seasons, he was gone. Because of the intense conflict, Damian was also let go. Despite having 12 million viewers, that episode seemed to be coming to an end. Murray wasn't simply leaving SNL. He was on his way to something very else, but not before almost blowing up the place. As a practical joke, Murray smuggled explosives into John Belushi's dressing area during one of the peak season episodes in 1979. They made a loud noise. Security had to take over. Although nobody was harmed, everyone was shook by the chaos, music. Some people found it humorous. It served as a warning to others. One cigarette away from a full-fledged fire, that was the dazzling and careless backstage culture of the day. The cast, music, never forgot that part, but the audience never saw it. In August 1978, Murray was filming Meatballs, but no one was sure he could be the star in a picture. Only $1.6 million was allocated for it. They used actual children as extras during filming at Camp Music, White Pine in Haliburton, Ontario. That soon turned into a catastrophe. The campers missed naps, crafts, swimming, and everything else they truly desired. They protested one day after a potato sack race was repeatedly postponed. They cut the tires of the dolly that had been filled with hydrogen. Everything froze in place. However, that mayhem somehow made it onto the screen. Murray improvised the sentence there. The dodgeball scene simply doesn't care. That became the focal point of the film. $43 million was made. Murray, a comedian, entered. Like a movie star, he walked out. He became legendary in Caddyshack a year later. Not even the script included his spiel about the Cinderella story. He was just asked by director Harold Ramis if he had ever provided fictitious comments on golf. It was that. In a single take, Murray made up the rest. The Carl Spackler figure was on the verge of disappearing. He was in danger of dying. However, Ramis and the Murray brothers saved him. In just 6 days, he shot the majority of his unscripted music moments. There was a $6 million budget. $40 million was earned domestically. The movie didn't just contain that one monologue. It became its essence. But the soul was irascible. In one moment, Murray was expected to hit a flawless golf swing. He wasn't. He destroyed a $10,000 custom-built water feature out of rage. The goal was to produce realistic ripple music effects. It had vanished. The crew became motionless. Ramis didn't shout. He did not need to. That set would not be recreated, as everyone knew. It remained fractured. And in some way, the film felt authentic because of its jagged edge. The damage was costly. However, the legend it created was invaluable. Then, in 1980, came Where the Buffalo Roam. Murray portrayed Hunter S. Thompson, assuming the role in ways that frightened others. He was tossed into an aspen pool, strapped to a chair, and spent time with Thompson himself. He remained true to himself when he appeared on SNL. Twitchy energy, rage beneath the surface, and a cigarette holder. Due to the film's poor script, Murray and Thompson had to rewrite several pages while filming. Days prior to publication, the conclusion had to be res-hot. There was no press screening. Murray was unable to shake the part, and the movie was never completed as planned. He carried Thompson with him like a ghost even after the filming was finished. He was given a new type of anarchy by Stripes in 1981. Murray came up with the idea for the mud wrestling sequence with Ivan Reitman. "All right, I'll take the Aunt Jemima treatment on the spot." He added, it was filmed in an actual pit, and during one tumble, Murray accidentally punched himself in the face. He needed stitches. The sequence was so graphic that the MPAA nearly rated the picture an X. In order to bring it back to our John Candy-hated music, Columbia Pictures had to recut it twice. Said he had never done anything so embarrassing. He refused to even remove his shirt, music. Reitman, however, refused to end the scenario. It persisted, and Stripes emerged as yet another cult favorite resulting from mishaps, bloodshed, improvisation, and obstinacy. Bill Murray gave his everything to his films, often going too far, rather than merely acting in them. On the Ghostbusters set in 1984, there was a moment that didn't sit well. In an unspoken way, Murray abruptly grabbed Sigourney Weaver during a flirtatious scene. The script did not include it. The cameras cut off. For hours, production stopped. Weaver shook. Everyone else on the crew and in the cast was tense. Murray's crazy improvisations were well known, but this went too far. Eventually, they were able to resolve it enough to continue filming, but that moment remained. Long after the movie earned $295 million at the international box office, people continued to bring it up. Little Shop of Horrors appeared 2 years later. Murray had a peculiar small part to perform. A man who enjoyed undergoing excruciating dental operations was Arthur Denton. He and Steve Martin's gas mask wearing scenario turned into a bizarre comedic flurry. The decision to cast Murray had actually caused conflict between producer David Geffen and director Frank Oz. However, he refused to adhere to a screenplay once he was cast. In every music take, he improvised. They spent 2 days filming it, doing perhaps 20 different takes. He became so engrossed in the nitrous gas section at one point that he fainted. Only from the mixture of artificial gas and the overall intensity of it all, not for real. The editors eventually acknowledged that they had difficulties. It was like splicing together 10 distinct moods because each take was so different. In 1988, Scrooged was released. Murray was involved in the creation of that one, not just an actor. He frequently reworked sequences and co-produced. The final version did not include one sequence in particular. Murray's character Frank Cross loses it on a group of Christmas elves in a live broadcast that was supposed to have family-friendly lines, but instead he went on a tirade filled with profanity. Although there was a lot of laughter on set, it was too dramatic for a PG-13 certification. The filmmaker, Richard Donner, was forced to cut it all. However, viewers continued to comment that it was one of the most hilarious scenes that was not included in the film. Quick change hit the ground hard in 1990. Murray portrayed a clown-clad bank robber in The Odd Little Movie. He was also a co-director. It didn't go as planned, though. Jonathan Demme, the original director, retracted his offer. Howard Franklin and Murray stepped in at the last minute. Murray insisted on improvising about 40% of the lines on set. It was a messy outcome. Although viewers were perplexed, critics appreciated his enthusiasm. Despite having a $17 million budget, the movie only earned $15 million. However, because of its peculiarity and Murray's quirky decisions, it eventually developed a sort of cult following. And then, what about Bob? By 1991. And it wasn't just the chaos on screen this time. In order to pull a method act, Murray chose to stalk his co-star Richard Dreyfuss off-camera. He trailed him everywhere, including backstage, at restaurants, and outside hotels. It wasn't humorous. Dreyfuss became so irate that he nearly left the movie. Frank Oz, the director, had to intervene before things got out of hand. Shoots were postponed. They were so tense that the crew did not want to get in the way. Even yet, the film earned $80 million, although Dreyfuss would not talk to Murray for years. The injuries were more than just a plot device. They existed. When Groundhog Day arrived in 1993, Murray was exhausted. He was frustrated and worn out from years of SNL glory music. During the time loop, his character Phil Connors was expected to learn how to play the piano. Murray learned by ear as he was unable to read music. Although Rachmaninoff's Rhapsody music on a Paganini theme proved challenging, he spent hours practicing to make it appear authentic. A double performed the close-ups, but he handled everything else. Harold Ramis, the director, forced him to shoot more than 100 takes. Some claim he drew inspiration for the character's metamorphosis from Murray's own burnout. A man was gradually falling apart behind that smile, despite the film earning $105 million. Murray embarked on an entirely new endeavor in 1994. He portrayed transsexual Hollywood character Bunny Breenage in Tim Burton's Ed Wood. Murray went all in. He never wavered in his persona, not even at lunch, and he colored his hair platinum. Burton later said, Murray brought vulnerability to the role in a way few could. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't mock. He embodied. The film became a critical darling, and Murray quietly earned new respect as someone who could do more than just riff on camera. But that didn't mean the behind-the-scenes drama stopped. After Ghostbusters The 2 in 1989, Murray vanished. He refused to answer Columbia Pictures for 2 years. He was angry about unpaid royalties, $20 million worth. The studio stalled. Murray sued. He didn't budge. The case was settled privately, but the damage was done. Sequels were delayed, music, for years. Talks collapsed. It became one of the most famous royalty battles in Hollywood. And it shaped how studios handled contracts with stars after that. He had been the class clown for so long that people forgot he had a face beneath music, the mask. Bill Murray made a living out of chaos, sarcasm, and punchlines. But by 1998, something inside him cracked. Then came Rushmore. Wes Anderson handed him a script that didn't want laughs. It wanted silence, regret, decay. Murray took it like a dare. He was 47, wore sad, boxy suits that made him look like a man who had lost the manual, music, for life. He dropped 20 pounds. He tapped into something he buried decades ago, like that day in 1970 when airport security found 10 pounds of marijuana in his bag. He was 19 then. That mistake ended his baseball dreams and almost wrecked everything. But now it lived inside Herman Bloom, the quiet, pool-floating, soul-withered businessman in Rushmore. The movie flopped at just $17 million. But something shifted. Hollywood stopped laughing and started watching. By the time the Royal Tenenbaums rolled around in 2001, Wes Anderson had built a strange little world, and Murray walked right into it as if he'd always lived there. He wore a dull cardigan and round glasses and mumbled lines that were never in the script. In one scene, wrapped in a bathrobe, he looked straight at the camera and said, "I'm a doctor. You understand what I mean." Nobody planned it. Anderson kept it because it was perfect. That moment said more about him than 10 monologues could. He wasn't trying to be funny anymore. He was just being that film brought in award nominations and praise, but Murray didn't care about the trophies. He said Wes's sets were the only places where no one told him to shut up. He took $9,000 for Rushmore, worked for free on Bottle Rocket, and once flew to Paris just to crash a Q&A at a Wes Anderson film festival and tell a joke. Nobody invited him. He just showed up. In 2003, Sofia Coppola took him to Tokyo. Lost in Translation was different. No big script, just a 3-page outline, some hotel rooms, and jet, music, lag. Murray played Bob Harris, an aging actor, fading in a foreign city, selling whiskey to strangers. Scarlett Johansson, music, was the girl in the next elevator, equally lost. They whispered to each other in the night, and it wasn't acting, it was something else. The film made $119 million, won Sofia an Oscar, and earned Murray his first serious shot at Best Actor. He didn't win. Sean Penn did. But the final whisper Murray, music, gave to Scarlett at the end, kept secret for 22 years, finally came out in 2025. "Don't forget me," he said. That was the whole line. The next year, Wes gave him a red beanie and sent him underwater in the Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. It was absurd on the surface. Rubber sharks, a made-up oceanographer hunting a mythical jaguar shark. But underneath, Zissou was a man broken by failure. They built a 100-foot tank filled with 55,000, music, gallons of water. One day, Murray accidentally fired a fake harpoon at Owen Wilson and grazed his leg. The crew laughed. Wilson limped. Nobody cared. Murray refused to, music, scuba dive, so they faked the underwater scenes. He said later he didn't even realize they were making an art film. He thought it was about a silly hat. Then came Broken Flowers in 2005. Jim Jarmusch didn't give him a script, just a letter, a roadmap, and 5 women to visit. Former lovers, one of whom might have had his child. Murray played Don Johnston, a man who said little, but felt everything. Around that time, the tabloids swirled with rumors. His marriage to Jennifer Butler was falling apart. A London tabloid claimed he had a strange hotel encounter with a female fan. It wasn't proven, but the noise around him was getting louder. While filming, he'd called Jennifer every night. Some scenes in the movie, Dawn sitting alone, the TV flickering, silence stretching, music, looked too much like real life. It made only $13 million, but it was another stone in the path of the new Murray, the one who didn't need punchlines. In 2010, while filming Get Low with Robert Duvall, things cracked again. He played a slick funeral director. But behind the scenes, tensions rose. Murray clashed with the pace, stormed off set one day, and halted production. It cost the studio time and money, and the crew felt it. Duvall stayed calm, but the tension left its mark. Critics still praised the movie, but people started whispering again. Murray was getting harder to work with. And then it got worse. In 2022, during music rehearsals for Being Mortal, a crew member accused him of misconduct. He had straddled her on a prop bed, kissed her through co-masks. She filed a complaint. Production was shut down. A $100,000 music settlement followed. The movie was cancelled. Murray called it funny and stupid, but the damage was done. The media backlash was brutal. He said he felt barbecued. He didn't say it wasn't true. The past didn't leave him alone. In 2016, his cameo in the all-female music Ghostbusters reboot caused another storm. Leaked Sony emails from 2014 showed he'd criticized the cast privately, calling it unnecessary. The studio even considered suing him to force a cameo. Fans exploded. He later said he did it because the cast was funny, but the email stain stuck. Even Zombieland, Double Tap in 2019, where he died on screen in a violent zombie scene, had chaos behind it. During rehearsal, he punched a co-star, music, by accident and broke his hand. They kept the scene. It looked real. It was. By 2020, Sofia Coppola called again for On the Rocks. He played a flirtatious father, suspicious and smooth. The film was shot in New York under pandemic lockdowns. They had only 3 days in certain neighborhoods. Tight, secretive, strange. Murray said the film made him feel nostalgic and tired. The lines blurred again between role and reality. In 2023, he joined Ant-Man and the Wasp. Quantum Mania. It was Marvel, but he didn't play by Marvel's rules. He refused to act in front of a green screen. Took 50 takes of a single growl. The crew laughed. The director called it dedication. But the delay was real. The eccentricity's still there. Then 2025 arrived and Murray showed up at Sundance, not with jokes, but with confessions. He said he had been lazy for years. He said he used to wait for roles to fall in his lap, that now, music, he was starting over. Indie films like The Friend and Riff Raff gave him some spark again. He said playing destructive men felt like a kind of penance for his own mistakes. He teamed up again with Kristen Wiig for Epiphany, playing a billionaire who helps a desperate eyes after she loses everything. The director called it a mirror of life's absurdities. Murray called it fun. The early screenings in Berlin drew attention. He still had it, if only in flashes. In The Phoenician Scheme, another Wes Anderson project, he played a cameo called God. He was 75 now, still showing up, still strange, still swinging. He said he owed his energy to jazz and golf, music, and was planning a 2026 tour to sing Bob Dylan and the Kinks. Not act, sing, because why not? And maybe that's the whole point. Bill Murray never followed the map. He got arrested at 19, broke his own hand at 69, whispered lines we never heard until he was 74, and kept showing up when no one expected him. The man who once said he'd do Caddyshack 2 and disappear ended up turning sadness into art, mistakes into moments, and whispers, music, into memories. He didn't just change his career. He changed the way we see people who make us laugh.